The motherboard is arguably the most important component of a PC, and although it can be a bit cumbersome and a little awkward to install, in the end it really is not too difficult. However, there is a chance that you will need to do a little troubleshooting along the way. So let's bring back the open and closed case and go through the process of installing and troubleshooting a motherboard together. Now, first thing I want to mention is there are multiple ways to protect against ESD. As usual, I am standing on an ESD mat, so I don't have to worry about too many of them. But for the purposes of this demonstration, I'd like to introduce you to an ESD strap. Now, these are really cool. You actually slide this over your wrist, and as long as this metal makes contact with your skin, and as long as you have this clip to another piece of metal, you will actually be able to ground or reduce the electrostatic buildup that you have within you. So we're going to go ahead and put this on, and I'm going to go ahead and clip this to my friend, the closed case right here, and we're going to actually walk through the process of installing a motherboard. But first, there's a couple things we need to talk about. The first is our standoffs. So if you see these, they are included in every single motherboard that you find. In fact, if you've bought a few of them over the years, you probably have an entire drawer full of these because these are the things they give you a surplus of. But these are standoffs, and these are actually critically important because most cases are metal. And if you run electric through that motherboard and then it contacts metal, you can have shorts. So these standoffs actually give us like a little bit of clearance there above the case so that no matter what, our motherboard doesn't actually ever contact that metal case and potentially short out. Another useful factor about these is it really provides for a stable mount for the motherboard. If we look here inside of our closed case, we can see that I've actually got a few of the standoffs already installed here, and we can see that there's holes for a few more standoffs here. That's really cool. I'm going to go ahead and take one of these, and I'm going to install it into this other slot here. Okay, and screw that bad boy down, and now we have an additional standoff here in our case. Awesome. Another thing you want to use, or you want to be aware of, is the I/O shield. Now the I/O shield is actually particular to the type of motherboard that you have. So it's really won't work with another motherboard. You need to make sure you hold on to this I/O shield. And it's actually a really cool thing because it's nothing more than a glorified dust blocker really, right? It's used to actually block dust coming in. It's pretty much what it does. I'm going to go ahead and install my I/O shield here. And then what I'd like to do is I'd like to install my motherboard. And I'm going to go ahead and slide my motherboard in and make sure it's on my standoffs. But uh-oh, something's wrong. Look at that. These don't line up. Let's go ahead and break out the CompTIA A+ troubleshooting theory steps and figure out what went wrong here. Number one, let's identify the problem. Well, if you look here, yeah, they don't line up at all. So I'm going to go ahead and test my theory, and I'm going to remove this motherboard, set it down here, and I'm going to go ahead and swap the I/O shield into what I think is the correct position. So I'm going to flip that over like this. Also, a little note here on these things, they're really thin, sharp metal. They're not really like grounded down at the edges or anything. So just be a little more careful when you're pushing these in because I've cut many of fingers on these. Now that we've actually tested the theory, we've actually gone ahead and flipped that back over. Let's go ahead and establish a plan of action to resolve the problem and implement our solution. And our plan of action here is going to be quite simple. We're actually just going to take our motherboard and we're going to try to fit it in now that we have that that we have the proper orientation on our I/O shield. Ooh, that fits pretty good. Let me go ahead and try and slide that in a little bit. There we go. Beautiful. Awesome. All right, so we've tested our theory, we've established a plan of action to resolve the problem and implemented that problem. Now that we have the motherboard in and it lined up really well with this I/O shield, all we need to do now is verify that full system functionality is there and document our findings, right? So that we always have that repository of information to draw back on should we need it in the future. It's a little hard to see, all the nooks and crannies here in this closed case. So let's go ahead and slide it out of the way and bring in our friend, the open case. By the way, if you think this case is as cool as I do, you can find it on places like Amazon or anywhere online really by just searching open air case. You'll find a ton of different variants and for all sorts of form factors and styles, but it is an absolutely amazing case. So I'm going to go ahead and click this, connect this up here, and I'm actually going to move it to my left wrist so that I have a little more room to maneuver here. And these are actually grounded into plastic slots, so that's perfect. And let's go ahead and demo our motherboard in the open case. First thing we want to do is make sure we've got everything lined up. I know that for this particular case, this is the area where those expansion cards are going to go. So this is the proper way to actually mount, the proper orientation, I should say, to actually mount this motherboard. Now, if we take a look here, we can see that there's holes here, right, for our screws to go in. And if I move this just a little bit, you'll notice that the standoffs don't line up with the holes in the motherboard. But if I just adjust it ever so slightly, you can see that those line up pretty perfectly, and we're ready to install our motherboard. Now, it really is as simple as lining up the holes, but there's one thing you want to make sure of, and that is, just like when you tighten lug nuts in your tire, you don't want to cinch down the motherboard completely in the first screw. You want to tighten a little bit, add another screw in another area, tighten a little bit more, and then slowly but surely cinch those down. And that's it. We've just troubleshooted and fixed some issues with a motherboard and installed it. But there's a couple other things I want you to make note of. CompTIA is going to ask you on the exam, or one of the has a possibility of asking you on the exam, about a couple of different things that you're going to notice if you ever have some actual hardware defects with your motherboard. The first one is capacitor swelling. So all of these little things here, all over the motherboard, are capacitors, and as you can see, there are literally dozens of them here, and a capacitor's sole job is to hold a charge. So if you ever open up your motherboard, something's not working right, or any PC, and you notice that some of these capacitors are swelling, please immediately practice proper power handling, remove the power from there because you've got a defective motherboard. Another thing is, and it might actually clue you into a swelling capacitor, is a burning smell. Now over time, you'll get used to some of those computer burning smells, but definitely if you notice a burning smell and you notice a capacitor, immediately remove power and don't use that motherboard any further. But other than that, that's it. We've just installed and troubleshooted a motherboard using the CompTIA A+ troubleshooting theory process.